Session today is simply going to be a case study of how to just explaining qualitative data management in practice, and I'll be sharing my personal examples of cases in this session. And so please bring about your contributions as well, and ask any questions, and you could also give suggestions on how to improve some of the cases in your own studies. So the cases I'm going to share with you is from in-depth interview studies I conducted where I did some in-depth interviews with farmers, and a more recent one, which is the second case on farmer participatory workshops. So just seeing how I tried to handle by applying those principles that we learned this week in managing data from these two cases. So what was collected in these cases? So in the first case where I had the in-depth interviews, I simply had audio recordings and also photos of sketches drawn by farmers just in a sheet of paper. And in the second case where I did farmer participatory workshops or discussions, I might say, I recorded audio. I had audio recordings, had photos of sketches drawn by farmers as a group, and also paper forms filled by farmers, and also took my own field notes. Actually, in the first case, I also had some field notes, but you can see that I've even forgotten them because I did not use them due to very poor data management. So here are examples of when I say sketches, you can look at examples of what I was collecting in terms of the sketches by a group of farmers. And here on the right, that's an example of a form filled by an individual farmer. So in terms of the data tracking in this qualitative research, what really happened in my cases, and I'll be mixing with the two studies. So these are like a cumulative experience. Was that in the most recent one where I was having these participatory workshops with farmers, the first case, just in the first day of data collection, I lost some of my data, which I thought they were quite of a very useful discussion. And it was because the audio recording was not on during the start of that group discussion. So I only realized this after coming back home and trying to check now, I want to listen to the audio, only to find that I had not recorded that part of the discussion because I'd not put on my audio recording then. So, so this actually in this case, it was one of my first alarming calls of ensuring that I have a process in place to track all the data that I need to collect, because as I said, I collected different forms of data. So this loss of data was actually an alarming call and had me sit down and start recalling the discussion that happened, which of course I could not remember everything that farmers said then. And then the second bit was on also seeing like where are my files, or where should I store them, and who is going to collect what, following the experience of losing some of the data. So like I had to start thinking about who is going to collect what, etc. And then from a previous experience on the transcription, where I did an in-depth interview, like I had the first case where I had in-depth interviews. It was, the transcription phase was kind of a challenge because I had not set in place as to who will transcribe, when should that transcription start, and what parts of the recording will be transcribed, etc., and how long will that transcription take. So I did, like initially I had planned that I was going to transcribe around, what was that, 17 17 interviews, which took an average of 45 minutes each. I had planned to transcribe them myself. And when it came to reality, I found that I could not do that myself. And so I had to hire people along the way to help me with the transcription. So these were cases and things that really happened to me. And I thought they could be helpful and tried to put into perspective this data tracking system when you talk about it. And then the anonymization of data. So in the first case as well, where I had the interviews, the in-depth interviews, I was collecting some of the information, like in my transcripts, I had the farmer names, I also had phone numbers as well. And then I realized later that this data should be kept secured because it was not part of the agreement in the consent form. So I had to start thinking through how to anonymize that data. So it was a practice that I had to adapt along the way, but I had not initially planned for. And so in the second case, I was well planned for. So these are just examples. And so in the cases of where, like, following these experiences that happened to me, what I had to do now, mostly in the second case study on farmer participatory workshops, I had to start assigning, like I had to assign a task to a research assistant who and gave him or told him what he'll be responsible for collecting. So example, the photos, etc., all the audio recordings, he will be the one responsible as I facilitate the discussions. Yeah, things like that. And and also I had to put in place a shared folder where we will be synchronizing this data collection and ensure that we upload the data from each, like we upload the collected data from each of the group activities that we conducted in a particular day. So this is just a sample of how my data collection folder kind of looks like in trying to in an attempt of trying to improve my data tracking from the farmer participatory workshops that I had with farmers. So in the second case, as well as to where are my files, so like who will be collecting, I had set that in place. So like where are my files and where should I store them? So as I said, I put that I put a synchronized folder, but as well I had to give a consistent file naming systems because we had sketches from different groups. We had transcripts from a particular group. So trying to synchronize this all together so that they could have a consistent, there will be a consistent naming system for a particular group of farmers or for a particular individual farmer or for their sketches and their transcripts as well. So this one was from the in-depth interviews. These were my file names. Where I had like from all the 17 interviews, I just had to give them as an interview and put a participant code there. And in that participant code, it does have an indication of their locations. So like the ML and the MD, these are from interviews from different locations, from 2 different locations. So that was I thought that was a way of naming them in a simple way and which would be meaningful to me. And for the case study, where I had some group discussions, like for the farmer participatory workshops. So I did have groups of different people, young men, young women, and elderly women, elderly men from, again, 2 locations. So this is simply an example of how I was trying to name those files. And so anything related to the sketches from maybe a group of elderly women will follow that naming of the location, Mdilu, elderly women, and then a sketch, or whether it's it's a photo from that angle, like a group photo, etc. They will follow this sort of naming. Maybe I'd not said before, but please, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. If you have any sort of observations, any clarifications, please put them in the chat, and I will try to pick them along the discussion instead of me talking through and through alone. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so these were examples. And then with the transcription, who will transcribe, when should the transcription start, what part of the recording should be transcribed. So this as I said before, this was a challenge in my second case, and also in the beginning of the data collection of the case study too, where where I had the first group. I worked with the first group and looked at the audios, and then found that I realized that some of the audios were too long because I was being too restrictive or too careful now because I lost some of the data. Then I made sure that I start the recording at the very beginning of the group discussion, and then try to pick later out of that audio discussion, try to pick or point a time when the transcriptions should start. So I had to select those parts of discussions, and also try to indicate to my transcribers that you'll start transcribing from this point to the end, or from this point to a certain point in the discussion. And also another thing was to have a template for the transcriptions, because given my first experience where I had, I thought I could do the interviews, the transcriptions myself, I realized it's impossible, at least in my case. So I had to I assigned 2 transcribers, and made sure that they kind of understand the symbols, though in reality, I realize it's not really easy for someone to adapt that, but at least a few symbols to just indicate the nuance in the discussion, or in the audios, or anything that was missing, so that when I start analyzing the data, I may know what have really happened in the audio discussions, in the group discussion, sorry. So as a note, I would say that in this case, and from experience, the process takes time. So it is best to seek people early on, so that you can have these people to help. But if you have, say, software which is good, which can detect the language that you're using to transcribe, and you find that it works kind of well, then please, it is even easier, and you don't really need a lot of people to assist you with those transcripts. So I just wanted to share with you, because of our previous discussion on Wednesday, we had questions around how should we use those symbols in the transcript. And I just wanted to show you some examples. They're not really perfect transcripts, but just helpful probably as to how I try to apply them in my transcripts. Hopefully you can see a Word document now. Can you?
Yes, Nuru, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So I've just tried to give this as an example. So I had, in order for me to make sure that, because I had 2 transcribers, then to make sure that the transcribers follow the same format, I put the symbols just on top and the meaning of those symbols, so that they could use them when they find them necessary in the audio, in the transcription. And so I started, and had some sort of metadata there for each transcript as to where it took place. and the interviewee code, etc. But what I wanted to show was in cases such as this, where like the consistent format that I used was the question and answer format, like the example that we saw on Wednesday. But then I tried to put some symbols, like for example, the words in bracket here with a single bracket meant that this was an explanation of something that was being referred to in the discussion. Yeah, as something that was being referred to in the discussion, though not mentioned by either the interviewer or the interviewee. And so so that was one example of a symbol that I had used, and also trying to show you in this other place as well. So these were words that were inserted by the transcriber, showing that the person who is speaking was referring to this thing in the bracket. And then the other symbol that I wanted to show were this one here with the double quotations. So like in this case, it is simply like a transcriber's comments. So probably when an interview, for example, in this case, an interview was speaking, but he was also showing, was trying to demonstrate with their hands, whatever a plant, the height of a plant. So the interviewer here, the transcriber here, and in this case, it was myself because I interviewed, I did the interviews myself. So in this case, when I was transcribing this, I did note that it was when the person was showing by a show of hands that if the maize plant reaches here, then pests do start infecting the plants, etc. So I had to put that as a comment in the brackets as well. And then also other comments or similar comments are when like saying someone was laughing. So when they were answering mid-sentence and laughing, so putting those as my, like using the double brackets, yeah, the double brackets to indicate the transcriber's comments. And then the other symbols that I used, you can see there are some places where I used 3, some 2. Well, these were not really very consistent, but in the cases where I had put 3 dots, say, these were mainly like there was some omission of some words. So maybe someone was laughing and talking about something that is out of the topic, then I had just put 3 dots in there. And whereas when there was a long pause, also like just an elongated pause, then I would either put 2 dots or in this case here, 4 dots to just show how long there was a pause before someone said something. Yeah.
Okay, so Nuru.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we are having a broad display here, we are not able, like I am not able to see what is highlighted in the yellow. So what you're trying to say is if someone was laughing, so the yellow part is you've indicated the word laughing and then the 2 brackets, or I don't know.
Yes, yes. So in this case, for example, here I said laughing and then 3 dots showing that there are some words that they spoke, but they are omitted from this transcript because I found that they were not, you know, like where you laugh and you start talking about other things and then get back to the discussion. So that is what happened. I put that laughing in 3 dots there, saying that, showing that there was something that was missing, like some words that are omitted. And then where you find 2 dots or 2 dots or 4 dots, it's just a matter of showing that there was a long pause before saying whatever came next to that in that sentence.
All right, now it's clear. But all that has to be indicated somewhere to show that these symbols, they mean this.
Yes, yes. So I did try, because I did the first transcripts myself. So I did try to indicate that in the box here, like in the first, like I gave like a what is this? Like a template for people to follow.
I get it now.
Yeah, though I would say that it's not really easy to track that, even for myself. Like I keep learning how to use those and how to just make, like, to ensure that you're trying to capture whatever happened in the audio recordings rather than writing your transcripts as notes. So I would not say that this is like a very, very perfect symbol and you have to use the same symbols, but you as the person who is in charge of that study or that project, then make sure that you set symbols that you can understand, and your transcribers will also use the same, so that when you start analyzing, you may know what was really happening in that discussion. Yeah. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, all right. So now I think I'm getting you now clear. So it means that when it comes to transcription, there are no standardized symbols. You make up on your own.
Yes, but there are symbols like three dotted. There are symbols which would say that we normally even use them. Like I think they're kind of standard, though we cannot really say that these are we have standardized symbols for transcripts, but like there are those symbols which are normally used sometimes even in writing. When you read other sort of writings, you would find them. So like the three dotted lines in most cases, three dots in most cases, you see it normally, even in stories, you would find that maybe it indicates what something is missing, or like that sort of a pause or something like that. So I would say that these symbols are rather common, but I think we don't really have to say that we are formalizing this as the symbols for transcripts to be used only in transcripts. I think you could use the symbols that make sense to you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, but you have to make sure that you indicate what they mean, and also trying to write the transcripts as verbatim rather than notes. So yeah, because that is the whole essence or the whole purpose of the symbols there.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? On that point, or any other additions?
Not in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so that was just an example of a transcript. Let me go back to my slide. Yeah, so that was an example of a transcript from just an in-depth interview. So it was a discussion with a single farmer, but the same could be applied. I did use the same symbols also in the transcript for the participatory workshops, which I'm still doing because it is a current study. I mean, it is a more recent study and I haven't really completed the transcript as well. So where is my slide? Okay. Yeah. So, and so I said, so that was one way of handling the transcripts. And also remember about the file namings of the transcripts, as I showed you earlier on, to make them anonymous, that they should not indicate a farmer's name or something like that while naming your transcripts. And then the other thing that I had to do, following my experience on the Fieldnotes, in my first case, in the first study where I had in-depth interviews. So I realized that I was writing my notes in a notebook, but when coming to analyze, do the analysis, I only relied on the transcripts and kind of forgot about the Fieldnotes. Like it was really hard for me to start going back in each of the notes that I had written. And yeah, I could recall the points from the notes, like by reading the notes, but just putting that consistency between the analysis which you're doing using software and then having a paper to analyze those, to capture the reflections that happened, that you wrote down in the field notes, it was kind of hard for me. And therefore I kind of did not really refer back to those field notes. It was only when I had maybe something very crucial that I had to go back to, then I looked at those field notes. So what I thought maybe I could improve this time around was to one, I had two options. I have two options actually. So I wrote notes still in my notebook when I'm in the field, and just after a group discussion, I would write down all that I had observed in that discussion. But then I had to either transfer those notes, given the time, if I had enough time that day or the next day, if I was not going to the field, I had to sit down and write those notes, transfer those notes to a single PowerPoint file, which I kept updating regularly as I got the field notes. So I had put that as a reflections PowerPoint file. And also the second case when I had to do, the second option when I had when I thought it was getting too much and maybe I did not have enough time to transfer the notes daily. So I took some of the photos, like I took photos of some of the pages of my field notes and just transfer those photos into the PowerPoint slide and kept updating them that these are notes from this date, etc. So for example, this is what, like my capturing of the notes of say that was 25th of March. Okay, my observations from the first group. I wrote some of these notes, and so I realized that I don't really have enough time before the next group activity to write down all this that I had captured. So I just took this picture and added it in my PowerPoint slide. So the second case here, you're seeing this picture here of exploring, these are notes that I had typed into the PowerPoint, but there are also some of the slides which I had just put the pictures in this same PowerPoint file. And this is just one way, but I think other people could have other ways, but it is just a way for me to improve my experience from last time when I did not really go back to the field notes because they were in a book that was already filled up, and I did not want even to go through it again. So better have them in a file where I could easily refer to, and also helpful in the write-up of your results. Yeah. So those are just ways, and then coming to the confidentiality of, here I've written of the archived data, but not only of the archived data, but also even with the data that you're using like daily to analyze those transcripts. So in the first case, as I said, I had omitted some of the personal data in some of the transcripts, but in some other transcripts, the personal data was there. So it is very risky leaving that personal information, the personal data of your participants in a file that you are regularly using, because anytime someone could be opening your file, your computer, and have access to that information. So like in my case, what I am currently doing is that for all those files that I'm using to analyze and also to which will eventually be archived, I've omitted all that personal data because I only require that personal data for follow-up later on, for follow-up activities later. So I've kept the original transcripts on their own and have those transcripts that I will be using in the analysis omit their personal details from there. And also the audio recordings, like in the first case, which I finished transcribing in the case of the in-depth interview study, which I completed transcribing. So those are already archived, and they're only archived until the end of the project. And as per the consent the agreement that I had with participants, these audio recordings should be deleted at the end of my study, which the year was also indicated in the consent form. So I have to delete these audio recordings then. And lastly, maybe like part of the, like a thing or a reminder in terms of data management in qualitative research, I would say that it's always good to give yourself enough time for the piloting and data collection. And this does not only apply in the qualitative research. I think it's also for the quantitative, for the activities that collect quantitative data. So give yourself enough time so that you can work on the issues that appear, and also try to modify your tools in the data collection process, and also putting in place a good data management framework for your study, so that by the end of your data collection, you have everything in place, you have your some consistency in that framework, and yeah, you just go on to the collection or the continuation of maybe your transcriptions, etc. And the other point maybe I would say is that from my experience I would say I would categorize myself as a less experienced researcher in qualitative research activities, like in conducting qualitative research activities. So I found that in most cases, this process of qualitative research, and as well as even the management of this data, is learned as you practice it along that phase of your research. So yeah, so be adaptable, and also yeah, be just willing to change along the way. If something is not working, then do it this way. That is part of learning, which is continual in our life. So yeah, I think up to that end, I've talked a lot, but I would just like to pause here and allow any questions or suggestions or additions that people may have.